as a result, people are unintentionally transferring dead and dying embryos into these recipients every single day that have no chance of ever making a pregnancy.
So think about this. The national average pregnancy rate on embryo transfer in our cattle industry is only 42%. So what if there was a way to improve that number and, of course, in turn, improve the ROI? Now, to do that, we have to be placing more viable, higher probability embryos into these recips. And the technology to do that is literally at your fingertips.
They can just take a 30-second video of these embryos with their phone, mounted to their microscope, and then we've worked with hundreds of different producers and veterinarians over the past 6 years to train machine learning models to identify embryos that make pregnancies and those that don't.
This is the flagship example of how artificial intelligence is going to change our industry for the better. It's not scary.
Today, Cara Wells, founder and CEO of Emgenisys, and Jared Wareham, industry tech strategist, join me as we talk embryo viability, AI-driven embryo scoring, and what this means for both the registered and the commercial producers. Then later in the program, we stay in the technology lane as I sit down and visit with Terrell Miller of CattleMax. That's on today's episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Well, today we're learning about some new innovative technology in our ranching world. Hi, everyone. Justin Mills here, host of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Good to have you with us. We're going to be getting to that in just a few moments. And of course, as we said later on, Terrell Miller with CattleMax will also be with us, and we'll be hearing from meteorologist Don Day, which, by the way, if you want to hear what his 2026 weather outlook, you can catch last week's show as we did that. Speaking of previous shows, I wanted to mention this one. Had a great conversation back in episode 241 with John Maddox, the Maddox Cattle Company, about his ranching practices that he's put into place, and just a great discussion there. The title of that show, When Emotion Meets Discipline, and I just appreciate the conversation that we had with him. And I might also mention that Maddox Cattle Company is going to be having their maternalizer bred female sale. That's coming up on the 7th of March at Ogallala Livestock Auction in Ogallala, Nebraska. About 3,000 head of home-raised maternalizers is what John was talking to us about. Now, if you want to know what that maternalizer is all about, he talks about how they came up with that composite set of bred females that they're going to be selling. A lot of work into that. In fact, I believe over 20 years worth of work that they put into those types of females out there that work really in a lot of different parts of the country. So if you want to check out Maddox Cattle Company sale coming up on the 7th of March there at Ogallala, Nebraska, check it out by going to their website at maddoxcattle.com. Well, let's jump into our conversation here today. And joining us on the program is Cara Wells, who's the founder and CEO of Emgenisys, and Jared Wareham, who is an ag tech strategist. And guys, good to have you here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, Cara, as we were talking, and Jared, as we were talking before we started, I said, we need to really identify when we start talking about embryo technology and something, Cara, that as a founder of Emgenisys that you're working on to solve a situation or a problem in the industry, I think we need to go back and define that a little bit. And I think for a lot of us that are in the ranching business, the concept and knowing what embryo technology and embryo work is, we genuinely probably know from a surface standpoint what that is. So we also know when we start talking about that it can be very costly, and it's not just something just everybody rolls up and decides that they're going to do. So with that in mind, that's been kind of one of the drivers for what you've got going, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So when I first got involved in the IVF and ET industry, I was shocked that more people weren't actually using it because it has great potential to improve genetic progress and gains and really make the herd more productive and healthier. But once I started talking to producers and really understanding what happens there on the ranch, I realized that people believe, because they've seen this time and time and time again, that IVF is expensive and pregnancy rates are low. And that's really prohibitive to a lot of people using IVF and embryo transfer into their breeding programs. And so defining that as the problem, we had to take a step back and look at why are the pregnancy rates so low? And a huge part of this problem is that embryo analysis hasn't changed since we first started doing this over 50 years ago. It's just that embryologists looking at the embryos under a microscope and choosing which ones appear to be good enough for transfer. And as a result, people are unintentionally transferring dead and dying embryos into these recipients every single day that have no chance of ever making a pregnancy. And so with that knowledge in our pocket, we said, okay, how can we evaluate embryos in a way that outperforms the human embryologist looking at them? And in this new era of technology and computer vision, I imagined that we would have better solutions to evaluate these embryos that can get the pregnancy rates up and make it more affordable for everybody in this industry to use and access the gains from.
Mm-hmm. Karen, the affordability of it really is coming down to the success rate of it. And typically in the embryo work, and I know I've got a brother that does some of this because they've got a registered Angus operation, but I'm not familiar with it as a commercial guy myself. So what kind of rates and costs are we looking at, just where we see today with this?
Well, the national average pregnancy rate of IVF right now is 42%. And so let that number stand where it stands. And when we look at the cost of this, yes, there's the cost of making the embryos, of the labor, of the veterinarian to transfer those embryos for you. And that quickly adds up to hundreds to thousands per embryo. But there's also the opportunity cost of that recipient animal that we put those embryos into. Right now, as cow prices are at an all-time high, we have to ask ourselves, if we're putting an embryo that's not going to get that recipient female pregnant, is she better off getting bred in some other way? And what is the cost to feed that recipient? So right now, yes, I believe that making the embryos and transferring them is expensive. But right now, I think the most expensive part is just keeping those recipients.
Yeah. Jared, do you have any additional comments on that?
100% what Cara said. And I think keeping those open recip cows and even getting them, spread out. And I think that's something years ago people really began struggling with when they were not only putting in embryos, but even artificial insemination. If you don't follow the script or the protocols right, you can get, not only open cows, but cows that are spread out. And of course, in the commercial space, the best way to make money is to group them up tight, right? And got to make big loads, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think the cost of those open cows is a killer. The knowledge now that Cara has helped the industry learn, that we're putting in dead embryos unintentionally. The other big piece of it, Cara, is that we're throwing away a lot of really good, viable, healthy embryos that we could be putting in instead. And the new yardstick that she's created is just that next generation of technology and insight-driven software that's going to help anybody in the embryo business, whether that's one of the large companies that are doing third-party work or somebody that wants to open their own lab, be more successful. And I think the challenge to the integration of it thus far has been, we've done business in a certain way for the last 30 years. And her technology, though, even though it works and is helping producers and increasing, up to 60% plus conception rate, Cara. I mean, it's amazing.
We've seen up to about 80.
I mean, it's amazing the jumps that can be had and the success and increases and the inefficiency decreases that you can have with this technology. But it's hey, we've done business for 3-4 decades this way. How do we then figure out how to utilize this technology? And I think it's just a matter of time. If the people putting embryos in and making embryos are vested in their customer success, then clearly this is a tool that they need to deploy.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a break here, Cara and Jared. And when we come back, Jared, you referred to it as a yardstick, as a tool that can be used. And Cara, I want you to explain what you've developed here in that. But then Jared also addressing how do we change our business mindset of utilizing this technology, I think is where we also need to talk about. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk on both of those subjects. So we'll do that when we come back. Well, as we head to break here, I want to mention that Leland Red Angus, they're having their upcoming sale. That's going to be on the 13th of March. And folks, I'll tell you right now, if you're wanting some good Red Angus genetics for your herd, these are trusted genetics out of a reliable program. Check them out. Leland Red Angus Ranch, their sale coming up on Friday, March 13th. That's going to be at the ranch, 1 p.m. Mountain Time. If you're not quite sure where they're located at, they're just north of Beach, North Dakota, or southeast of Sidney, Montana, selling 185 head of bulls. Also in with that, 65 head of commercial yearling heifers in that sale. Give Melvin or Todd there a call at Leland Red Angus. You can check out their sale catalog going to their website at lelandredangus.com. And again, their sale coming up on the 13th of March. And if you can't make it, you can sure check them out at DV Auction.
Your herd needs protein. When the seasons shift, so do your herd's protein needs. SmartLick protein tubs deliver consistent nutrition that drives performance, helping cattle make the most of available forages, maintain condition and power through winter efficiently, giving you peace of mind. Feed smarter, not harder. Go to smartlick.com. That's smartlic.com to find your dealer.
Imagine keeping your cattle exactly where you want them, while being able to tap into insights powered by a collar and an app. No Fence is the world's first virtual fencing system for grazing livestock. From the palm of your hand and delivered with GPS technology, you can set and move pasture boundaries, gain insight into grazing patterns, receive reduced animal activity alerts, and more. No wires, no posts, just empowered grazing that supports healthier land and your herd goals. 10,000 plus producers globally already trust No Fence. Explore the possibilities at nofence.com.
Okay, Cara, let's jump into the technology itself, the software that you've got, what you've developed, and what it's going to do. We talked a little bit about knowing in the last segment that embryo technology is definitely the issue. The problem that we're trying to solve is to get the return on investment to a point that it makes sense and could be used, and we're not, as an industry, wasting money. So with that in mind, all right, you've addressed the problem. Now give me your solution.
Great, thanks. So how we came up to this solution was just the wide understanding that embryos, if they're healthy, they should be growing dynamic organisms. They should be going from one cell to a calf in a little over 9 months. And so if that embryo is alive, it needs to be dividing, it needs to be differentiating, and it needs to be doing the things that it needs to do to become a fetus and eventually a calf. And so we asked ourselves, how do we capture that? And, you know, the cell phones that are in our pockets right now are quite good, and they have really good video cameras. So I was like, you know what? What if we take a 30-second video of these embryos and then use different graphic image processing techniques and artificial intelligence to analyze these embryos frame by frame? Can we capture signatures of cellular activity that correlates to life and ultimately that full-term calf? And so our technology today is based on just that. We allow our customers, our users, these are embryologists and veterinarians who actually handle and care for these embryos. They can just take a 30-second video of these embryos with their phone, mount it to their microscope, and then we've worked with hundreds of different producers and veterinarians over the past 6 years to train machine learning models to identify embryos that make pregnancies and those that don't. So when our users upload this video into our web-based platform, the machine learning will run this behind the scenes, and then it'll produce a score, which is essentially that embryo's pregnancy probability or how likely it is to make a pregnancy. So users can select the embryos that make the most sense for their operation that day based on their desired outcomes.
Okay. So what kind of success rate are we looking at as far as, I know you talked about the 60 to 80% a little bit ago in terms of the embryo, getting it all the way through, which is what we've talked about is the ultimate goal. But I guess provide a little more detail.
Sure. So we give a score from 0 to 100. So 0% likelihood, 100% likelihood. And I have not seen a whole lot of hundreds, to be honest with you. But the kind of success rate you see here is if that embryo, even if it's beautiful and looks totally normal, if it scores a 2, it has a 2% chance of making a pregnancy. If it scores an 80, it has an 80% chance of making a pregnancy. And because we've transferred tens of thousands of embryos that we know their scores on, we've been able to correlate this and prove that the score that we give you is really that embryo's pregnancy likelihood.
Okay.
And so the way that this could be implemented on the ranch is if that embryo has a 15% chance of making a pregnancy, but it's high genomic seed stock, and that calf has the potential to be worth tens of thousands of dollars, you might go ahead and take that 15% chance on that embryo. But if it's a less expensive embryo from lower quality genetics, or say it's a beef embryo for beef and dairy, you might want to better utilize your recipients on those embryos with at least a 65% chance or greater. So it's totally up to you, but we allow you to choose your own destiny.
Okay. And you kind of answered one of my questions right there, because I was getting to what kind of accuracy you were at. And the next thing that leads me to is this. Have you established benchmarks? For example, as you were just saying there, if you've got a high, an animal that could be an extremely valuable animal, but it just has a 15% rating there, and you go ahead and do that. Is there benchmarks where you say, okay, here's, low chance? And I know you put it on a percentage basis for us, but I guess it's back to you as the producer to say, well, this is an animal that could be worth several $100,000 versus one that's worth $10,000, right?
Yes, totally up to the producer. Because, they're picking these genetics for a reason. They're sourcing these genetics for a reason. Or maybe they got the embryos on sale at an auction. I don't know. But they're the ones who know what they're looking for herd improvement reasons. So it's completely up to them on the genetics that they want to choose and the kind of risk that they want to take on these embryos.
Yeah. Jared, I want to go to you, because I know as you have been working to get this information to the folks, like Cara was talking about, the embryo technologists, the veterinarians, the ones that are handling this stuff, what are you finding with them, and how has it changed what they're doing?
Yeah, I think the big things that come up, obviously, are increased success rate. Everybody wants their customers to be successful. So if they have the ability to utilize or integrate a technology, and to break it down simply for the listenership, it's fairly technical stuff that Cara has developed, and that she mentally went through a hypothesis process, 6 years ago, and now we're at this point, and it is very technical, and I get lost in it sometimes. But to make it simple, really, you're taking your cell phone and you're using it you're just turning it into one more thing in your tool belt that you can use if you've got an on the ranch IVF lab, or you're doing conventional embryos, or if you're even taking conventional embryos out of cryopreservation. Certainly, any of those examples, you simply clip this thing onto a microscope, take a 30-second video, upload that sucker to the cloud, and within a minute, you've got the results. And you can do 10 plus embryos at a time, right? As long as you're labeling them and keeping track of which embryos which. And that's a little oversimplified version, but man, you can speed through these things in a lab and come up with protocols. I've been just last week talking with a big lab in California about what our recommended protocols are for it. And so it's really, to me, very simple. It's not super complicated. And I think the other thing that comes to mind, to answer your question, Justin, is the amount of labor challenges that we have right now as a nation. Large animal vet shortages is a real problem, right? It's only getting worse, and we're trying to find ways to find solutions to the lack of large animal vets. It's the same thing goes with seasoned embryologists. They don't grow on trees anymore. And to have somebody that, has 20, 30 years of experience and has looked at thousands upon thousands of embryos under a microscope, they're not very easy to come by, right? And so to be able to, even this technology still would make them better. But I guess the point we're trying to make with the labor standpoint is you can have somebody that maybe is highly skilled at putting embryos in, but is not very good at grading them, or has very limited experience with being a grader. This technology instantly makes them as good as you can get, because it eliminates human error. It eliminates the old way of evaluating embryos solely with the naked human eye. And to your point, I want to add some to that last little piece. Yeah, you may have a viability score of 15 on a grade 1 day 7 embryo, and you may not want to put it in. And there's two parts to the equation, right? You're going to be palpating some cows to make sure they're ready to receive embryos, and you're hopeful that they all had the right kind of heats, and there's still some limitation to our knowledge there. But, if you're putting embryos into cows that are ready. In my mind, if I'm sitting there and I've got one that could be $100,000 bull, and it's a grade 1 day 7, and it's a 15 score, and I've got a grade 3 that's a 70, I'm putting a grade 3 in. And that's what changes the equation for a lot of these breeders. Is we didn't know that as much about the 2s and the 3s, and there's a lot of those that got pushed aside or thrown away because they didn't look good. But now we know, because with her technology, you can watch cellular division, you can watch the metabolism of an embryo and how is it metabolizing too fast? Is it going to flame out and die? Is it metabolizing too slow because it's probably dying? Has metabolism stopped altogether? Or is it on a perfect trajectory to make a viable pregnancy at 60 days, and it's got a score of 75 or 80. I'm going with the viability score of 75 to 80 based on the 60,000 plus embryos result or records you have, Cara. I mean, it's to me, that's what's changing. Isn't the decision on whether I put a 1 in or not. It's I'm going to throw that 1 away, and I'm going to take a 3 with a higher score, and I'm not going to make necessarily less embryos. I'm just going to change how I sort them. It's like changing how I sort feeder cattle, right? It's the same thing with this, and I'm using a tool that's assisted with more power than the human eye, and then backed up with artificial intelligence to help me make smarter decisions about which embryos I pick and put it in those cows that are ready.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a break. I got more rapid fire type questions, just some quick things I want to throw out when we come back, all right?
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Gelbvieh and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Gelbvieh and Balancer influence females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. This year, make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer genetics.
Horn flies stressing your cattle? Make fly control one and done with Alticid IGR XRB. Alticid IGR XRB delivers season-long horn fly control from a single application bolus, providing up to 195 days of relief regardless of mineral consumption or location. It breaks the horn fly life cycle with no impact on beneficial insects, giving you flexible, consistent control. Learn more at cargillanimalnutrition.com/Alticid bolus.
All right, as we continue on here, my guest today, Cara Wells, who is the founder and CEO of Emgenisys, and also Jared Wareham is joining us. He's an ag tech strategist. And Cara, in the last segment, we were talking a little bit about the details of it. What, again, was the time frame from when you can upload information and be able to download the data or what it's telling you about that embryo?
We generally say less than 2 minutes, but I expect it to get faster as, technology, servers, upload speeds get better.
Well, and it's going to be dependent on upload speeds of your location. So, people need to understand that. If you're on high-speed internet, then it's great. If you're still on dial-up, well, it could be a couple days. But no, nobody's on dial-up anymore. But anyway, that was more of a joke. Okay, real quick, the other thing, we can do 10 at a time. Cara, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We designed it to where it could work in workflows. So people usually analyze embryos in groups. So just take a video of the group, no problem.
Okay. Another thing, and because you've referenced that you are utilizing artificial intelligence technology to analyze that, it's already good, the information, the algorithms that you've got put together, but I would gather as you go, it's going to get better. Am I assuming that right?
Bingo, exactly.
The amazing thing about AI, right, is the more you use it, the smarter it gets, which is the fun part about it.
Okay. Embryos aren't just in cattle. Other species. Let's talk about other species.
Absolutely, yeah. So we are working on developing models for other livestock species like sheep, goats, horses. We're actually working with several human IVF clinics to do this in people as well. And I've even gotten to have some fun with exotics and play around with some embryos like rhinoceros, big cats, and Grevy zebra.
Oh, wow. So let's bring it back to the folks that are listening here from the ranching side of things. As we have already identified, it is the embryo technology. You guys were mentioning before that there's way over half. I mean, maybe some, I guess if you take all of the registered outfits in the country, I'd say well over half, and probably some breeds have up to 80% are utilizing embryo technology. This is going to be a game changer for them, isn't it?
That's our goal. Let's get their pregnancy rates up, improve their ROI, and get these embryos really making them calves that make them money.
Mm-hmm. Jared, relate this then back down to me. As the commercial rancher myself, I may not necessarily right now be looking or doing embryo technology and really don't have a plan for it, but how does what Cara has put together here with Emgenisys then eventually sift down and affect us in the commercial business?
No, that's a great question. And I think to me, the easy answer is it makes your supplier of your seed stock genetics that much more effective at moving at the pace of accelerated genetic improvement they need to keep you on the leading edge, or kind of stay on the muscle, so to speak, with the genetic trends, and make sure that you're always supplied with the best genetics for the best value, so that the feeder cattle that you produce are exceeding expectations in every way, right? I mean, we want to have cattle that are born at the right weight, grow as fast as they can, and then from an end product standpoint, by the time they hit that feedlot, they grow, they eat good, right? They're good consumers, they eat good, they convert well, and then hang a great carcass and et cetera. And the other thing is I think, I don't know this, but it sure seems like that we're on the edge of maybe a little bit of a evolution in the industry. I mean, because of the shortages of supplies of beef and no real signs of expansion that's, at least massive expansion that's probably going to happen anytime soon, we're going to have to make cattle bigger. And we've downsized our cow herd drastically over the last 2 or 3 decades, right? Because we want a moderate, efficient cow. Not everybody has the same size cows, but for the most part, we've done a really good job at driving a lot of maternal efficiency into some of these cows. Well, we're going to need terminal bulls, and lots of them, to help breed to these cows to produce offspring that can get to 15, 16, 1700 live weights consistently. And that's hard to do when you have a bunch of 13, 1400 pound cows, unless you have the right bulls to put on them. So I think the producers now in the seed stock space, if utilizing, genetic technologies and things like Emgenisys, they can create those terminal bulls that are needed to create the feeder cattle of the future, because we're going to have to continue to do, I think, what we've always been asked to do, and that's make more with less. And I think embryo transfer is the way to do that. And the other thing we really haven't talked about today is another way to make more bulls is to select more male embryos. And that's one of the cool things Cara hadn't talked about yet, is Emgenisys' ability to sex embryos as well as just test the viability and health of embryos.
Yeah, that's a good point. And real quick, maybe Cara, touch on that briefly.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of the amazing part about artificial intelligence, is we can harvest and extract data from material. So in this case, like videos of embryos, that wasn't previously possible. So we're trying to collect as much information about these embryos. Like, did they make pregnancies? What sex is that embryo? Was it an embryo that was affected with something like large offspring syndrome? Did it make twins? Was there a genetic defect? And like we touched on earlier, the more data, the more users that we have using this, we can go back and feed those outcomes into the model. So not only can we predict embryo viability, but we can predict sex and C-section and all these other things that just were not previously possible.
Yeah. Well, very interesting. And Cara, if folks want to find out more information, your website, emgenisys.co, if folks are interested in, maybe you're a purebred outfit, you're a registered outfit, and you say, hey, pass this information to my ET guy,
Yeah, great. Yeah, please just check out our website, emgenisys.co. And the contact form, that does not go to a robot. It goes directly to me. We can just share my email, my contact information, and be happy to answer more questions.
You bet. We can do that in our show notes as well on that. And Jared, some final comments from you as well.
Yeah, I think to me, Emgenisys and what Cara's created is the feel-good story behind artificial intelligence and machine learning. I know a lot of us still don't really understand it in the industry, and there's some skepticism, some cynicism about it. But to me, this is the flagship example of how artificial intelligence is going to change our industry for the better. It's not scary. And artificial intelligence is not a shotgun that you can aim at everything and spray it. It's a scalpel. And when used in conjunction with solving a pain point that's existed for a long time, right? Finding a better solution than the naked eye, and coupled together in that fashion, I think machine learning and AI are going to change a lot of things. And I think what she's created to me is, and I've told a lot of people this, I think it's the first technology deploying AI that's going to change our industry drastically over the next 10 years. Hopefully 5, because once it's rapidly integrated, it's going to just take off. So
yeah, very good. Well, Cara, Jared, thanks to both of you for being here today. We'll put some contact information in our show notes, a link to the website as well for everyone to go to from there. And Jared, just one final thing before we go. I know you have an answer ready for this. We had you on last time. I said, what book are you reading? And you gave us one. What book are you into now that you would recommend for folks?
So for all you guys and your guys and gals that love cowboy history, especially in your listener range, Florida a lot of times doesn't get the props it deserves on being an absolute cow and cowboy state. So I'm gonna give my buddy Chance some props for turning me on to a book called Land Remembered, and it's about the Florida cowboys that, the crackers, as they called them, the Florida cracker cowboys, and living in the swamps and taking care of cattle. If you love a good historical book and a good read about cowboys, the history, then you'll love that one. So Land Remembered.
All right. Thanks, Jared. We'll have to definitely check that book out. And I'm sure the Captain Tim O'Byrne, who really enjoyed your last recommendation, he's probably going to want to check that out as well. Guys, thanks for being here. Cara, good to visit with you and to hear about this new technology that you have brought into the industry. And as Jared alluded to a moment ago, it definitely looks as though it's going to be something that could be very altering and changing to our industry going forward. Appreciate you guys being here on the program today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, bud.
And again, our guest joining us on the program today was Cara Wells, founder and CEO of Emgenisys. Jared Wareham also joining us, ag tech strategist. A great conversation here today on some breaking technology in our industry that, as we talked about, is going to be revolutionary. If you want to find out more information on it, maybe somebody that's into utilizing embryo technology or will be looking at that at some point in time, this is a show where I would point them to. Send it out. Let them know about this. Again, the website for more information is Emgenisys, spelled EMGENISYS.co, and I will put the link in the show notes as well. Well, we're going to stay in the vein of technology in our next segment, and we're going to switch a little bit, and we're going to focus more on what are people using and why would you be looking at management software for your herd database. Well, we're going to be talking about that next.
Are you disappointed with weaning weight gains that don't seem to keep up with the increase in bull prices? Try capitalizing on the muscle, growth, and efficiency of Limousine and LimFlex hybrids. Whether you sell calves at weaning or retain ownership through the feed yard, the extra muscling and performance of Limousine cross calves will add pounds to your pay weight and dollars to your bottom line. In fact, genetic trends for weaning weight EPDs in Limousine cattle document an increase of nearly 25 pounds over the last 10 years. Limousine and LimFlex deliver dollars to your bottom line. Limousine today, profit tomorrow.
Calving season is a favorite time of year, but along with that special time are dangers, extra stress, and increased labor. Safety Zone calf catchers are all about safety and making processing new calves easier. Designed for ATVs or UTVs, one person can do the job and never be threatened by the protective mother cow. Make this and every calving season safer and easier with a Safety Zone calf catcher. Watch videos and customer testimonials or order yours today at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914. Affordable and made in the USA. Make your upcoming and all future calving seasons safer, easier, and stress-free. Durable and designed to work anywhere you can drive your ATV or UTV. Order online at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914 today.
I said in previous episodes that in upcoming shows here and even today, we will be sharing with you some of the conversations that we had with folks at the 2026 Cattle Convention that was held back in February in Nashville, Tennessee. Well, one of those conversations was an opportunity to sit down with Terrell Miller, who's the owner, founder, and CEO of CattleMax. Well, we talked about quite a bit of different things and how technology has evolved over the years and where it's going, especially in the world of herd data management. We started first where they began 27 years ago, back in 1999. Terrell, good to have you here today on the program.
Hey, glad to be here. I'm a long-time listener and always glad to be on the show, too.
Well, good. You appreciate that. Well, before we jump into things, I think it's interesting. One of the things we were talking about is the fact that as the Working Ranch magazine is celebrating 20 years this year, you guys have been, you're a family-owned business. You started in 1999. It's something you started up in college, you and your wife. 27 years doing this. It's a software that's been put together by ranchers, for ranchers. And kind of tell me how that evolved years ago.
Yeah, it's great. It's been an incredible journey along the way, and it really started out just we had a basic need to solve, and that was we needed a really basic cattle software to help us track for our own family herd, and it was also as a project for my wife and I to finish up in school. After we got done with that, we met with a local ranch who had several hundred head of commercial cattle, and they said, we need an easy-to-use software that's designed for everyday ranchers to use. And so that was really customer number one back in, I will remember the date as July 8th, 1999, because my wife and I got married 2 days later. And they're still customers of CattleMax here in 2026.
So, Tara, when I think about this, I remember I started my first professional job out of college in 1999. Okay. And prior to that, I was in some technology business and in veterinary clinics. But at the same time, I realized, as you were talking about that, and that's when you started, I realized there's been some huge evolutions and changes in technology since that time. And internet, of course, the access to high-speed internet being one of those things. And as you made that transition through those years, and of course now we're in 2026 where the big technology change we're all talking about is AI technology. But as you go back through that, what do you remember as you changed through those years and technology was changing, not just what you guys were doing, but how you adapted to that?
We really came in, like I said, in the late 1990, into 1999, 2000. That was right around the dot-com boom and bust, which was a really bit of a hectic time for a lot of companies that had venture capital and on outside backing. So it was interesting just seeing the wind down and really the aftermath of all of that. But in our case, we were just a bootstrap, self-funded software company focused on serving producers as goal number one. And so we'd really seen some slow traction in the early 2000s as more and more producers were moving to the internet, and it provided a great way really for us to be able to grow nationally and not just be limited to Texas and the Southeast. So the internet really opened it up. It also made for a great way to offer customer service between email and online videos and online downloads. It really helped bring software really literally worldwide. We currently have customers in over 70 countries.
You've been through where people have had to come to grips with cloud-based technology too, because previously everything was a floppy disk in the computer practically, maybe a USB thumb drive or something like that. That had to have been kind of a stressor to some point, don't you think?
That was the single biggest decision we ever had to make in our company. And this would have been around 2010 or 11, which is when my daughter was born. That's how I remember that. Is CattleMax was the leader nationwide with our desktop software. You would download it online and load it onto your computer or install it from a compact disc for those that still remember CDs. So it was a desktop. It was a different pricing model where you'd pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to buy that license. And we felt really that the opportunity with online was going to completely change the collaboration. When you look at software in the old days, it really was somebody shackled to a Windows computer, kind of chained to it. Whereas with the online, you could begin entering data in the field on mobile devices, and it really changed the way where record keeping became a team sport and not an individual activity.
Okay, let's talk about the record side of it, because I think for a lot of producers, they have to keep records some way, somehow, right? I mean, for the most part, it's just how they choose to do that. And I think that you just made a great point there in the fact that it became more of a team sport rather than just one person entering that. And I think that's really where the value in some of this is coming from initially, is being able to have that multi-access, multi-point ability to get into it.
Right, as we're getting nostalgic here, reminiscing on the old days, the time I knew that our online software was the future of CattleMax and the future of cattle record keeping was back in 2010, 2011, when we had one of our, I like to call him a power user, one of our really incredible customers was testing our online version. And he said, guess what? I can't believe how great it's working for me. He ran a 800 head operation, and he said, I gave an iPad to my ranch hand, and I had one in my hand, and we went out and recorded calvings that day in the field, and when I got back to the office, my record keeping was done. Yeah. When they divided up the work, when they did the record keeping in the field, that was my aha moment. And that rancher, Jimmy Curtis, who's been on our team for over 10 years and is now our director of ranch systems. So he's a customer. He was a customer first, one of our early testers, and now does this every day.
Yeah. As you and I were talking before we started, one of the things we wanted to talk about was the importance of the data. And I think the importance of the data really gets back to, frankly, I'll be honest with people, don't do this if you're not going to use the data. But at the same time, as we keep that data, there's a lot of value to that. And I think if we can get it to that point, and that's where, really the strength for record-keeping software is the fact that it's a central point and that we utilize that. And that's what you're trying to bring that source to the producer.
Right. I mean, producers have a lot more information now than they did 25 years ago. There's so much more data. And it's really important that you don't just create an electronic file cabinet, saving files and spreadsheets on your desktop and into different folders here and there, but really take those records that you worked hard to collect, that you spent money and time collecting, and really put them somewhere where it's in a way that you can use that data to really turn it into information and ultimately make informed decisions. That's really the key behind it.
I think there would be some that think, well, I'm not a registered or purebred outfit, so I don't really see the value of having a software type program. Do you ever deal with that? I mean, because I'm not a purebred or registered guy, but I am a commercial outfit, and I see the value in it just for the sake that we just have a central point that we got to be at. But really, I mean, it doesn't matter what size or what level of producer you are, there's going to be some value in that data.
It's interesting you bring that up, because that was something we, in years past, we saw much more common, of this, maybe the question of, I'm a commercial producer, do I really need to be keeping records? And just in the last few years, as there's so much more data, electronic IDs, weights, genomic data, PVP data from verified cattle, there's all this information that doesn't come up quite as much. And really, any producer that is tracking individual animals should have that information. And when you're going to the effort of tagging your animals and individually identifying them, keeping good records to make informed decisions is not much more of a leap than after you've already done the hard work of tagging them.
One of the things that I think, and you and I were talking about this before we started, you'd mentioned it, that we have a lot of data in our industry, and I've had conversations with other folks that have made that comment, that about the change that we're going to see in our industry now. Several years ago it was maybe EPDs and it was breeding and some really big things. That's still going on, so I'm not going to say, I'm going to downplay that. But the data and the management of that data, and I'm not just talking necessarily this cow calved on this date and her weight, but it's a lot of different technology that's in our industry today. How do you look forward into with CattleMax in being that central point with a lot of the different technology? We're talking remote water monitoring systems, we're talking cattle monitoring, all those kinds of things that's going on. What do you see as you look ahead?
Right, the registered record keeping side, I mean, there have been changes over the years with the genomic testing, and of course EPDs. There's always, it seems like a new EPD every day, but there's really been a lot more, I would say progress is the word I would use, in the last few years around commercial operations. I mean, it's incredible what Zoetis Zoetis and Neogen have with their commercial DNA testing, where you can, for $30 or so an animal, you can make your decisions from that. So there's just, a lot more of that information to keep up with. And it's not that a producer should go out and, find tools and then hunt problems for those tools to solve, but really it's a step back as a commercial operation and assess what are my goals and how can I use technology, whether it's genomic testing or process verification, weighing, electronic ID, to really help achieve those goals.
Yeah. Terrell, final question here in this, and that is, as you look ahead and as you prepare your company for where the industry is going, not just in what you're doing, but just as a whole, what are you preparing for?
Yeah, as a company, where we're at with CattleMax, our vision is that CattleMax is the rancher's hub for all of their ranch records. We look at CattleMax as a place that producers go to keep all of their information organized and in one place. And when we say that we want to help producers achieve that goal, it's important that we make it easy for them to import data from whatever other sources they have, make it easy for that data to come in, also make it easy for that data to come out. And so we're very much what we call an open to all policy, where if you're a producer and you have records in a particular hardware or marketing system or anything like that, we want to make it easy for that data to come in and out. We really believe in producers having a choice of what equipment, what hardware, what software they use, and just really wanting to make that easy for them.
Yeah. I know I said final question. It's like a preacher saying he's coming to a conclusion. So you talked about data, and I think this is always, and this was something I think several years ago, but the safety of our data. That's probably comes up a little bit. I think maybe not quite as much, but that's still, I'm sure, a valid question that folks would say, I want to make sure my data's safe.
That's a great question. And where we personally as a company store our data, it is on U.S. soil, on U.S. servers through U.S. companies. So that's something that's really important to us. And so where's the data stored? And that's a computer, that's a technology type thing. But I think something that is equally important is, who owns the data and who has access to the data. And ultimately, if I'm importing or exporting or sharing data, how is it going to be used? And I think that's a fair question that everybody that's looking at connecting a hardware and a software or whatever asks that question, so that they have that full understanding. And some of it is obviously privacy, but also it's important to know, is somebody else getting value for my data that I should be getting that value?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, Terrell, a great conversation here today. I appreciate you sharing your information here with us today.
Thanks again. We've been blessed to have that opportunity to work with the great producers for all these years and hope for many more.
You bet. Thanks, Terrell.
Thank you.
And again, that was Terrell Miller joining us on our program today. He is the owner, founder, and CEO of CattleMax. And by the way, if you'd like to find out more information about maybe starting your herd up and putting it in a database, or maybe you're wanting to switch over from something that you have been using, you can go to their website, find out more information. CattleMax.com is the website. And like I said at the very beginning of the program, one of the things that they tout, and he mentioned it, they themselves are users of CattleMax. So it's not just somebody that's kind of a desk jockey back there creating a program, hoping it works for you. This is something that works for producers, because they themselves and many of the folks there that work at CattleMax also run cattle, so they know kind of what is needed out there when it comes to record-based software management for our operations. Well, stay with us. When we come back, meteorologist Don Day steps in as we take a look at our long-range weather.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the WeatherStationExperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit MeasureRain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to MeasureRain.com.
Today's long-range weather brought to you by Long Range Cattle Dewormer, with 150 days of parasite protection in just one single dose. To find out more, their website is longrangedewormer.com. Well, joining us now with a look at our long-range weather is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, as we head into March here now, as we were talking before we started, and just re-emphasizing the fact that March is that transition between the winter months and the spring of the year, so we can really see not only only are we going to see some change in weather, but I mean, we could see it all too.
Yeah, and that's the thing is when the Earth starts to make its tilt going the other way, going into the spring and summer season, the added daylight really starts to make an impact in late February, where we're gaining 3 or 4 minutes a day in some parts. And that causes a big contrast to form between the lower latitudes near the equator and the cold air that's still up in the higher latitudes. And you just start to normally see the jet stream get stronger, more wavy, and you just start to see the frequency of storms go up. And that's exactly what we see, at least for the first half of March. We see the battle between that cold up north and the warm south really getting going. Now, there's some benefits to this because this can kind of shake things up and allow storms to be able to come through some parts of the central and western United States that haven't seen much storminess this season. And that means maybe some precipitation in some of the very dry areas that you see on the drought monitor.
Well, you kind of answered my question there, because that was what I was going to say, is what areas that are desperately needing it. And we talked a little bit in our weather outlook program, but not only the southern areas that you talked about, but also the western areas with the mountains. The snowpack is not very good, and I don't think we're going to get there. So it's going to really rely on what we can get for moisture in this spring.
Yeah, really. The next 8 weeks, the next 8 to 10 weeks are really, really critical for the snowpack is as bad as it's been since 1981. So we got to go back pretty darn far to see a snowpack that has been as bad in the West that we're seeing this year. Now, we do see the frequency of these storms, especially the central and northern Rocky drainages and the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest snowpack is really bad, especially in Oregon and Washington State and parts of Idaho. So the prospects for those areas to get a snowpack boost is looking good. Also for the Central Plains and some of the Corn Belt, which has been really cold this winter, hasn't been really wet, especially the southern and eastern areas of the Corn Belt. I see them getting into some good rain chances. So the prospects for a lot of the dry areas of the plains and the northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest, I think, will be the biggest benefactors of this pattern change.
So when we talk about some of this pattern change, and you had mentioned it a little bit, but we could see now some severe weather start to show up in the south.
We will. In fact, part of the south is going to see some really warm weather here in early March. Temperature readings in the deserts have started to hit the 90s in Arizona here over the last week, and that's a signal that warmth will expand. And so when you do get these storm systems that come across Canada and the Pacific Northwest, and they hit that warmer air in the south, you do have that recipe for severe weather. If you just look at a graph of tornado activity over the last 50 to 75 years, the month of March is when it really starts to go on the uptick. And so for folks in the south central and southeastern United States, you just kind of need to be aware that, yep, it's getting warmer, seasons are changing, but that also brings severe weather.
All right. Well, Don, appreciate your weather update here today, and we'll talk to you here in a couple of weeks.
See you then.
And again, that was meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-range weather. If you want to tune in each and every day to his daily video podcast, you can find a link to his YouTube channel by going to dayweather.com. Today's long-range weather brought to you by Long Range Epinephrine, 150 days of parasite control in just one single dose. Find out more at longrangedewormer.com. Well, I know we have folks listen to the Working Ranch Radio Show in a variety of formats, whether it's right here on the radio or through podcast. Just letting you know that our next show will be coming to you on the 14th of March. We're going to take a little bit of time off here, but we'll be back on the 14th of March, so be looking for that next show then. By the way, if you hear a show that you like, be sure to leave a ratings or a review. We appreciate that, and other folks do too, because when they're searching for shows or ranching type podcast or information out there, and they see that, that's helpful for them, so be sure to do that. We would appreciate that. By the way, if you have a show topic or a guest that you'd like us to explore, send me an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com, and we'll flush that out and see what we can come up with for a show on that particular topic or with that particular guest. The Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. Now, if you don't have a subscription to Working Ranch Magazine, you can get one started easily by going to workingranchmag.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Justin Mills. Be sure to tune in next time. And until that next time, keep your head down and your mind in the middle. So long.